All right, welcome everybody to this JDS webinar tutorial, What Do I Need to Start Doing Sublimation? My name is Colin Van Lint. I am one of 5 sublimation specialists at JDS, and on behalf of me and my team, I just want to say thank you guys for joining today. We're glad you guys can make it. I'm going to try to keep this webinar to an hour, and we have time for a Q&A scheduled at the end, so I'll try to answer all your questions. If I'm not able to answer all your questions, feel free to email me or call into our tech support line, and I'll definitely answer as many questions as I can. All right. This webinar is focusing on information to help people who want to get into sublimation better understand the process and also give them an idea of what to expect along the way. We'll be covering what different types of equipment are available and which suits your needs best. This will include design software, printers, paper, and heat presses. We'll also talk about different accessories and how they prevent common issues that can occur during the production process. All right, let's kick this thing off. All right, so for you guys out there who aren't too familiar with sublimation, you've probably Googled it or looked at it on YouTube, and it looks like a pretty basic process. You have a transfer paper with a design on it that you apply to either like a shirt or piece of metal or something like that, and you see them add some pressure with some heat, and they take it out, and all of a sudden there's this great image on it. But what's really happening when that process is going on? Because there's a lot of different processes that happen the same way, but for it to be true sublimation, what's really going on there at a scientific level. So I want to talk about the science of sublimation. I have a diagram here, and basically what this is showing is the term sublimation actually means when a solid form goes straight from a solid to a gaseous state. So this is showing the liquid form there would be like your ink in the cartridge. So that's when your inks are in its liquid form. Then once they're sprayed onto your transfer paper by means of the printer, it dries out, that's your solid form. And once we put that in the heat press, we put it on your substrate, which would be like your shirt or anything like that. That's your substrate. So once you attach it to that substrate and you add heat at a high rate and pressure, it goes straight to a gaseous state. And then these gases attach to your substrate. So how is it attaching to your substrate? Well, everything that we sell or everything that's able to be sublimated has a poly coating or is made out of polyester fibers. So like your shirts are all polyester, everything like that, and all our hard substrates are coated with a poly coating. So when that coating heats up, it opens up pores in this coating, and that's where the gas goes into. And when you take it off that heat press and it cools down, it's trapping that ink inside the coating. So here you'll see I just have 2 pieces of metal that I did just for this demonstration. You could tell that sublimation is often referred to as dye sublimation, so the inks are a dye. And what that means is whatever the base color of your product is going to kind of show through the metal. So as you can see here, I got a white piece of metal and I have a gold piece of metal. These are the same image on each piece of metal, but obviously you can see on the gold that yellowish hue is showing through, and on the text it's also gold, and that's because we're using CMYK printers, so they're not able to print white, and that's why like 95% of our stuff starts out white, because we're actually not able to create a white color. And so anything that you leave in your design artwork that's white is just going to be the base color of your substrate. What's good about this is that when it fuses to this coating, it's really resilient, so you can't scratch it off. It's not like a surface, it's not like ink on the surface of anything. So especially with shirts and stuff like that, it's not going to crack or fade or wash out. The downfall to it, because it is a dye process, you can't print on dark objects. So for instance, like a dark t-shirt, because we can't print white, we can't lay down any base color white to print on. So dark t-shirts aren't available to do, but besides that, it's really resilient, so it's not going to scratch or crack or anything like that. So that's definitely a plus. Next, I'm going to talk about design softwares. For some people who aren't familiar with design softwares, this can kind of be a steep learning curve and kind of deter them from getting into sublimation. It can be kind of intimidating. There's people who go to college and take, classes for years on how to use a design software, but I don't want that to scare you guys away, because with every design or with every, new endeavor, there's going to be a learning curve. So I'd recommend really investing some time. If you guys are serious about getting into sublimation, invest some time into learning a design software program. And there's a lot of useful resources out there. So there's a ton of videos on YouTube on how to use, like Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW or anything like that. So take advantage of that. Also, maybe you could take like a college course or something at a community college. This is going to save you guys a lot of time and headache, just even if you guys can learn the basic tools, and then, just learn a tool a day and build on that, and eventually you'll be using the program in no time. So the three programs I want to talk about, or the three main programs that we use, are Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and CorelDRAW. I would say that about 70% of our customers use CorelDRAW at this time. It's not necessarily because it's the best program, but a lot of our customers started out lasering and it was just an easy jump to sublimation. They just adapted that. So CorelDRAW, I would say, is a little more user-friendly than Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, but they all work really well. The fourth design program I want to talk about is Creative Studio. So Creative Studio is a free program that comes with the purchase of a Sawgrass printer that we sell. So it comes free with the printer, and what Sawgrass did is they created this program for people who aren't familiar with design, so they try to make it as easy as possible. What's great about it is, one, it's free. Two, there's a ton of videos on Sawgrass's website how to use it. So there's, I think, over 100 videos is what they told us on how to move around and manipulate things in this program. So that's really great. The downside to it is that the file format isn't compatible with CorelDRAW or Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop. So if you were ever to upgrade in the future to those programs, which are, I would say, are a little more professional, you couldn't take any of your files with you. So they would be kind of obsolete, and you would have to recreate them, which would take a lot of time. So that's really the downfall to it. Honestly, in my opinion, if you guys are gonna get into sublimation, you guys are gonna pick up a design program, I would start off with Corel or any of the Adobe programs right off the bat, because if there's still gonna be a learning curve with Creative Studio, and I think Corel and Adobe are just a little more professional. So if you guys are gonna get into it and you guys are gonna learn the software, just start with Corel or Adobe. I think it's better in the long run for you guys. So once we have our design, we need to print it out. So I'm going to talk about the printers next. Currently, we're carrying three different printers. We have the SG400, the SG800, and the Ricoh 7100. So these printers, the Ricohs were adapted to sublimation because they're inkjet printers. And what that means is that it doesn't use a fusion process, which involves heat like a laser printer. It just sprays the ink directly onto the transfer with like microscopic little sprayers. And so the people who created the ink, Sawgrass, they found that these Ricoh printers will work great with their inks. The SG printers, the difference between them and the Ricohs is there really is no difference. The SG printers are actually Ricoh printers themselves. They were manufactured by Ricoh, but they're just branded Sawgrass. So there's not a ton of difference there. One thing I will say is the Ricoh 7100 is a generation older, but what's good about that is that you can use it on older generations of like Windows. So you can use it specifically on XP and Vista, whereas the SG printers you would need to use at least Windows 7 or higher. So that's a nice feature. But as you can see here, as far as capabilities, the Ricoh 7100 has all the same capabilities as the SG800 as far as print size and stuff like that. So the SG400 is obviously the smaller of the two, so you can only do 8.5 by 11 up to 8.5 by 14. The SG800 printers can go up to 11 by 17, and then you have an option of a bypass tray, which is that tray connected to the back in that picture there. And what that allows you to do is feed the 13 by 19 paper through the back, and that's the largest size we can print on a desktop printer. So the Ricoh 7100 being a generation older, it's a little bit cheaper. It also will allow you to use it on XP and Vista. So if you guys are still running that, that's a good deal there. And the one thing I would say about the SG800 has over the 7100 is maybe the reds and blues are a little more vibrant, but they're all good printers. I still use the 7100 all the time in the office. It's still working really great. So after we print, we obviously have to print on your transfer papers. So next thing I want to talk about is the transfer papers themselves. So we sell two different types of paper right now that will work with those printers we spoke about. So we got TextPrint R and TruePix. These are universal papers, so you can use them on all of the substrates, whether it's a hard substrate like metal or a soft substrate like a t-shirt. You don't have to switch papers. One thing we have found though is that the TextPrint R works a little bit better on soft substrates and the TruePix works a little better on hard substrates, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need each individual package for those things. You can use either one for both. And that's the same with the inks. You never have to swap out the inks. It's all the same paper, it's all the same inks for all the items that we sell that you can sublimate on. The TextPrint R is a little bit cheaper. It's about 110 sheets for 15 cents a sheet, whereas the TruePix is 100 sheets at 19 cents. So that's another thing to take into consideration. But like I said, I'll grab either one of them. They work great. There's not a huge difference in them, but if you were to compare the two, you would see some differences between the hard and the soft substrates and how they perform. The TextPrint also has a watermark on the back letting you know that that's not the side you need to print on. So there's a specific side that you need to print on with each sheet. The TruePix doesn't really show that as well. It just has like a dull, like eggshell colored side and a bright white side, and the TextPrint has a watermark. So basically when you put it in the printer, you want to put, if you're using TruePix, you want to put the bright white side face down so that you're looking at the dull side. And for the TextPrint, you would be looking at the watermark side, so you'd put it face down and you'd be looking at the watermark side when it feeds through the printer there. So after we have our design on our transfer paper, we need to apply it to our substrate and heat it up. So next thing I want to talk about is heat presses. We carry a wide variety of heat presses, so we carry 3 different brands, George Knight, Hicks, and Insta. They're all American made presses and they're all really good as far as high production value and stuff like that. There's a ton of, it's going to range in price. There's based on, size and all these different features. The first feature I really want to talk about that I think is really important is a clamshell press versus swing away press. This is a feature that you can find on all 3 of those different presses, or a lot of presses out there, but I want to talk about why it's important to get a swing away over a clamshell. So a clamshell hinges at the back, as you can see there on the right. What this does is if you're ever going to sublimate on something that's thick, like an acrylic for instance, the way that press closes, it's only going to make contact a little bit on the back side and it's not going to be able to close completely. So you're not going to get good contact across your substrate. A swing away picks straight up and down. So what that means is it's going to make full contact on the top of that thing and not be hindered by the thickness of it. It also swings off to the right, so you can get it out of the way, a little easier to work with. The only thing I can say that the clamshell might have over the swing away press is that room-wise, if you guys are working in a small office and don't have a lot of counter space, the clamshell might be a little bit better just because it opens straight up and down. You don't have to have room for it to swing off to the right. But the swing away, you won't be hindered in any way with any of our substrates that we sell. So that's probably one of the more important things to look at. The next feature I want to talk about is a manual press versus an automatic. So an automatic press, this one on the right here, it uses air compression. So what's good about that is that once the timer goes off, it'll automatically release the press. So say you press something for 1:30, you have a customer come into the store and you start talking to that customer and you kind of forget about the press, and pretty soon you're hearing it go off and it'll automatically release that press. Whereas a manual press, once the timer goes off, you have to go back there and physically lift it up. So that's a nice feature about the automatics. The downside to an automatic is that it uses PSI, so you can't really get a good feel for pressure. So it's hard to tell somebody what a light pressure is and what a heavy pressure is, just because you can't feel it like a manual press. It's also, the automatics are a little bit heavier, so if this is something you think you'll be transporting around a lot, you might want to go with the manual. And honestly, we use a manual in our office upstairs, and we like it just because you can get a feel for the pressure. So a really light pressure, you can feel that. A firm pressure, it's just something that you learn with time. But once you get a hang of it, it's a lot easier to fine tune your pressure. The next feature I want to talk about is a digital press versus a non-digital press. So these two presses here are both digital. What's good about that is that you can see your temperature rise and fall when you press items. So when you first turn on your press, it takes about 15 minutes to heat up, 15 to 20 minutes. And so you'll see your temperature rise, and once it gets to the point that you want it at, it'll beep at you, but you can physically see, okay, we're there at 400 degrees, we're ready to go. Also, anytime you press something, it's taking so much energy to heat that item up, so you'll see that temperature drop. And if there's anything mechanically wrong with your press, sometimes you can tell by just looking at the temperature drop and raise. So if it's dropping like 50 degrees, there's definitely something going wrong there, like your heating element isn't keeping up. So it just kind of helps you keep track of your heat and make sure everything's working all right. It also has an automatic timer built in with the digital press, which on a non-digital press, you would have to use like an egg timer, which can kind of be a pain in the butt. And also with the non-digital, you just have to assume that it's at the temperature you want, and you don't really know if it's fully recovered in between presses. I mean, I've used one, it works, it's just not as comforting to know. I mean, it's more comfortable to know what your time and temperature is and see that happen as it goes. Next feature I want to talk about is how would you sublimate on a round surface, for instance, like a mug. So to sublimate on anything that has a curved surface that's not flat, you would need a specific type of press. So mugs, for instance, mugs are our highest selling item. But to do mugs, you have to have a specific press. So as you can see here on the right, we have a mug press, and it's got a cylinder heating element. What's good about this is that it's really accurate, but for each mug, it takes about 5 to 6 minutes to do one mug, which can take a long time. So that's great if you only have 10 or 12 mugs to do, but say you get an order of 100 mugs or 150 mugs and you only have a week to do it. Well, in that case, you might want to switch to a method which we call a wrap with a convection oven. So it's a silicone wrap that clamps onto the back there of the mug, and so you just wrap your transfer paper on it, then you wrap the silicone wrap on there, clamp it down, and you can put 6 or 7 of these in a convection oven. What's good about that is you can turn out a lot of mugs because it only takes about 15 minutes or so, 15, 16, 17 minutes, and you can get 6 or 7 done at a time. What can be hard about that is the convection oven sometimes it'll get cold spots in the oven, so it's kind of hard. You got to figure out where to move your mugs, and I think the learning process might be a little harder. It just might be a little harder to use in general, but your production time goes way up. So definitely consider that if you guys are looking into getting into mugs. All right, next we're going to talk about some accessories. So this is just a list of accessories that we use that we found over the years to help us be as successful as possible each and every time we go to press. So we want to be consistent, and we found that a lot of these items either help keep our stuff running properly or just help the process in general. So the first thing I want to talk about is Teflon sheets. And before we get into it, I just want to say that most of these items we sell, some of them we don't, and I'll make sure to point that out so that there's no confusion there. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Teflon sheets. As you can see in the picture, there's these thin brown sheets of Teflon, and basically all those do is they protect the bottom and the top of your press. So the bottom of your press has a thick rubbery black pad, and that can sometimes collect a lot of ink on it, and over the years probably gets torn up, you know, just from daily use. So we always put one Teflon sheet on the bottom just to protect that, you know, catch ink, keep it clean, make sure it's not getting torn up. And then we always keep another Teflon sheet on the very top. So if you're layering your press, you'll have one Teflon sheet on the bottom. In between, you'll have your Teflon or your substrate with your transfer, and then another Teflon sheet on top. And what that does is basically protects your heating element from direct contact with your substrate. So in case anything was ever to melt on there, you know, you accidentally put something in there that wasn't supposed to be on there, or sometimes like with the metals, they have a protective plastic coating. And if you forget to tear that off, that can melt to the bottom of the press or to the top of the press. So this is just to keep your press clean and, you know, increase the longevity of it. The next accessory that I want to talk about is what we call butcher paper. This is an item we don't sell. We actually picked this up from a local newspaper in town here. It's also referred to as end-roll paper. It's basically just a thin scratch paper. What this does for us is we can substitute it for Teflon. One, it absorbs stray ink for us, and it's great for doing apparel. And the reason it's great for doing apparel or any double-sided item is that your Teflon sheets can often pick up a lot of ink, but if you're just doing a one-sided item, that might not be a huge issue. But when you're doing something like a double-sided item, especially a t-shirt or something that's all white, those really pick up a lot of ink from anywhere they can. So using the butcher paper just keeps everything clean and pristine so that you know that you're not going to pick up any ink. You know, the downfall to it compared to a Teflon sheet is it's not reusable. The Teflon sheets are reusable. This is kind of a one-off thing, but if you just cut yourself a bunch of, you know, pre-cut a bunch of sheets, you'll have them ready there. It definitely speeds up the process. And there's always stray ink being thrown around off your transfers, so this paper is really good to pick up that stuff so it doesn't transfer onto any other part of the shirt. Next accessory I want to talk about is called a Nomex Pad. It's a thick felt pad used on brittle substrates, for instance ceramic, glass, and stone. And basically what this does is it allows you to add enough pressure to make good contact on your substrate without breaking it. So those items are really brittle. You know, the slightest amount of pressure can cause a crack in them, especially when you're heating them up. And what this Nomex Pad does is we put it underneath those substrates, gives us enough cushion so that we can add a little bit of extra pressure, make good contact, sublimate well on that, and not have to worry about it breaking. Next, I want to talk about a thermal pad. So this is a thin green heat conductive pad that helps evenly distribute heat and pressure and also aids in the contact between transfer and substrate. So for instance, this is mainly used, I think what we first started using this on was these travel bottles. They're aluminum sublimatable travel bottles, and we wanted to be able to sublimate them in the mug press, but they were too skinny. We couldn't make contact on them. So what we did is we got a sheet of this green heat conductive rubber and we wrapped it around the bottle to thicken it up, and then that way when you put it through the press it would be able to make good contact, and because it's heat conductive it gets really hot, so it just transfers the heat. It's not like it's blocking it or anything like that. So some of the items that we've found that this helps with are acrylics, water bottles like I mentioned, and some double-sided ceramic ornaments. So this isn't an item that you'll use very often, but when you need it, it's very crucial to the process. So I wouldn't say this is something that you have to buy right away necessarily, but if you're ever going to get into acrylics or ceramic ornaments or anything like that, it's definitely important to have in those instances. The next accessory I want to talk about is paper towels. This is not an item that we sell. This is just, you know, an everyday paper towel. We prefer Viva brand because it doesn't have any quilted pattern or texture or anything like that. And that's important because a quilted pattern or a text on it will imprint onto the coatings of your hard substrate. So if you add too much pressure, you'll see the quilted pattern pop up in the coating. So Viva brand paper towels. Basically what this helps us do is evenly distribute pressure and absorb stray inks. So a lot of the time when we're doing like thin metal, for instance, we're not adding a lot of pressure to it. It's a very light pressure. And what this helps us do is we just layer it up 5 or 6 layers thick, and it just gives us a nice cushiony base. And you can lay your press down on top of that, on top of your substrate, and it just kind of helps balance out the press with that extra cushioning. And also, a lot of times when we're setting up our templates on our design, we leave a bleed edge, which is basically an 1/8 inch thick. It's an 1/8 inch thick, bigger than your substrate. So you just have this line of ink all the way around. And basically what that helps us to do is line up our substrate in the middle so we know it's dead even, and we don't, there's some room for error there. But since that's not attached to any part of the substrate, that ink just gasses out and has nowhere to go. So these paper towels are really good at catching a lot of that ink. Next is a very important item, heat tape and repositionable spray. So these are used to tape down your transfers to your substrates and or stick them on there. So these are two things that we sell, and these are things that you're definitely going to want both of these. So the heat tape we usually use on hard substrates. It's a heat resistant tape, so it's not going to melt. You don't have to worry about it melting onto anything. And yeah, you don't have to use a lot of it, just one on each corner of your item, just enough to set it in place. With the repositionable spray, what we use that for mainly is apparel and double-sided items. So the issue with apparel is that you can't really tape down a shirt. You can try to tape down the edges, but the center of it's still, because it's a t-shirt, it just picks up and drops down. So when you release your press, it creates this vacuum effect. And what happens is your t-shirt picks up in that middle and drops down. And when it drops down, it's still really hot, so the sublimation process is still taking part. And if it doesn't drop down in the exact same spot, which it never does, you're going to see this double image that we've referred to as ghosting. So repositionable spray is really important on your soft substrates, whether it's t-shirts, canvas bags, anything like that. You definitely want the repositionable spray because ghosting will occur. Next, we are going to talk about how to clean your items. So sometimes when you're using that repositionable spray, you spray it on your transfer, you attach it to your item, and especially on hard substrates, if you're using it with hard substrates, it'll leave a residue behind. So what items can you use to clean your substrates without damaging them in any way? Well, we have a couple different things you can use. The one we use is Roncinol lighter fluid, which is pretty crazy. I was kind of surprised to see that, but it's really nice because you spray it into your paper towel, so it goes on wet. You wipe off any smudges or residue that might be on there, and because of the properties of the lighter fluid, it just evaporates, so you don't get any smudges or smears that you would get with like a Windex cleaner or anything like that you might have seen. You can also use a citrus cleaner or isopropyl alcohol. The next item is a vapor. Oh, I should mention that we don't sell the Roncinol lighter fluid. That's just something that we pick up at like a hardware store or something like that. All right, this next item is a vapor foam kit. What this does for us is that when we started sublimating on t-shirts, we noticed that when we'd put our transfer on there, we'd add all this pressure and heat. We would see the outline of the paper embedded into our shirt. So you would get your artwork on there and it looked like it was framed on the shirt, and that line was permanent. You couldn't get it off. You couldn't iron it out or anything like that. So what we came up with was this method of using a piece of foam underneath of your shirt. So this comes in a roll. It's a heat resistant foam. You cut it down to a size that's bigger than your artwork on your transfer, but smaller than the transfer itself. So what you'll do is you'll lay this piece of foam down. You can see in this picture here on the right that I've beveled the edges, which helps. So I'll lay that in the center of my press. Sometimes I'll even tape it down so it doesn't move. Then I'll add my t-shirt on top of it, get that all centered out. And then when I go to put my transfer on there, The only part that's making contact is the design part, because the edge of the paper is just hung out over the edge, just kind of sitting in midair, not touching anything. And so that's really how we solved that issue. And you know, this is a reusable item, so sometimes we'll even put busher paper over top of the foam so that it doesn't collect a bunch of ink. And it is reusable as long as you don't press it too hard. So you just add enough pressure to compress it about 1/3 of the way, and that's how we took care of that problem. All right, the next item I want to talk about is a lint roller. So this is just a lint roller that you can pick up at any store, whether it's, you know, Walmart or anything like that. What we use this for is it removes stray fabrics from our substrate. So somewhere along the production process, mostly on our soft substrates, they pick up these little fibers, and these fibers aren't really noticeable to the eye, but when you sublimate them, what happens is it leaves these little blue dots behind. And somehow those fibers have some type of blue ink in them, and when you go to press it, it leaves these little blue dots, which are then permanent. So we just make sure that we lint roll the shirt before we press it, or whatever soft substrate that you're doing. So like I said, this isn't an item that we sell, it's just something that you can pick up at a local store. The next accessory I want to talk about is a heat resistant glove. Again, this isn't something that we sell, it's just something that we picked up at a hardware store, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You know, nobody wants to burn their hands. This stuff is going to be really hot when it comes out of the press, so just make sure that, you know, safety first. You're always protecting yourself. All right. So things to consider. I just kind of compiled this list of either a lot of questions that I get or a lot of issues I see run into, you know, in the future after people start getting into sublimation. So the first thing I want to talk about is computer and printer compatibility. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit before with the, you know, the Windows, your operating system. So like I said, the Ricos, they can run on Windows, Vista, and XP, and all the way up to Windows 10, but the SG printers are Windows 7 and up. So make sure that you check your operating system and you make sure that that's going to work for you, because you know, if you have XP but you really would like the SG printer, then you're probably going to have to upgrade your printer or your computer software. Next, the RAM. So you want to make sure you have, the recommended amount is 4 GB of RAM on your computer, which I think is pretty standard these days with most computers, but if you have an older computer, you definitely want to check that out. You can have it, I think it will function on at least 2 gigs of RAM, but recommended is 4. And also you want to have at least 10% free of hard drive space. I've seen this cause a lot of weird issues with the printer, like you'll send a print and it just won't process because there's just not enough free space. So you want to have at least 10% free space on your hard drive. If you don't have 10%, I would just recommend getting an external hard drive, backing up your stuff, and deleting some of those files, and that shouldn't be an issue there. One of the main questions I get is which printer and heat press do I recommend? So what's going to be the best printer for you guys? You know, what's going to be the best heat press? I usually ask, you know, when I get that question, I ask them, you know, what type of items do you want to sublimate? What do you have something in mind, or do you want to do everything? You know, what are you looking to do? If you're somebody who's been lasering name tags for a long time, but you want to start doing, you know, full color name tags, something like the SG400, the smaller printer that has the 8.5 by 11 up to 8.5 by 14 capabilities, that might work for you. If you're looking to do apparel, you know, large shirts or full bleed socks, full bleed arm sleeves, anything like that. And when I say full bleed, I mean able to print all over it, like cover it from top to bottom. You're going to want to use a larger printer like the SG800 or the 7100, because you'll have that option of the 13 by 19 paper, and that's really the only way to get that full bleed effect. The next thing I want to talk about is, you know, you always want your heat press to be larger than your max size of print. So If you have an SG8 or SG400 and you can do 8.5 by 14, you might think, okay, a 15 by 15 press will work for me because I can cover that. And you're right, it will. But if you were to ever upgrade in the future to an SG800, you would also have to buy a whole new press. So what I usually recommend is going with at least a 16 by 20 press because that'll cover that 13 by 19 paper size. A lot of times, the press is going to last a lot longer than the printers will. So if you invest in a good press, it's going to last you 15 plus years, whereas the printers, they only last like 4 to 5 years. So you're going to go through a lot more printers than you are a heat press. A heat press will last forever. So if you're going to invest your money into something, invest it into the heat press. Another issue I see that pops up often is we'll get a customer that'll call in and he's having troubles doing a certain item because he doesn't have maybe the right accessory or his press doesn't really cooperate with that item. For instance, like I mentioned, acrylics with clamshell presses. I see this happen a lot. So I just wanted to put this in, check out our instructions on our website for each substrate before you go and purchase a bunch of them. This can save you a lot of headache, and help you prevent losing any customers in the future. Because say you wanted to do a bunch of ceramic ornaments and you buy 100 of them or whatever, and you get them in and you realize, oh no, I don't have the thermal pad to do them, so I'm not going to be able to successfully do these. And now you're crunched for time, and you got to tell your customer, oh, these aren't going to be done in time and stuff like that. So it's just a good rule of thumb to go in and check the instructions, because we'll list everything you need there. And if there's any weird accessories that you might need, or a specified press or anything like that, we'll list that. So it's just a good rule of thumb. Check that out. Next thing I want to talk about is equipment longevity. So I mentioned this before, invest in a good press because it's going to last a long time. I wouldn't recommend going with a Chinese press. I've heard they burn out really easy. If you get an American-made press, you can get it serviced in America. They usually have really good warranty deals on the heat plan, like a lifetime warranty on the heating element. And, they're usually pretty easy people to work with, and they'll troubleshoot with you and make it as easy as possible. So invest in a good press. Next thing I would mention is keep your printers powered on at all time. So contrary to people's beliefs, people think that when they leave their printer on all the time, they're wasting ink because it's doing little maintenance cycles on itself. But what's really happening is if you turn your printer off every night and you go to turn it on the next day, it knows that it's been turned off for a long period of time. So it's going to do a more thorough maintenance on itself, because that ink has just been stagnant in the lines. These are machines that like to keep the ink moving. They like to keep running. The more you use it, the longer it's going to last. So keep your printer on all the time so it can do those little maintenance cycles so you won't have clogging issues. And also print often. So say you guys don't have any jobs lined up for a week, try to print something, every other day, whether it's just like a test print or anything like that. You can make display items for your shop or anything like that, which could be good practice. Like I said, you could just do a test print or anything like that. Just try to keep printing on it. The more you use it, the longer it's going to last. The next thing I want to talk about is the ink. So the inks do have a shelf life on them, and if left in your printer too long, that can definitely cause some damage. So there's a use by date on the cartridge, but it's kind of a gray area. So what we use is we call it the 6-month rule. So the analogy I like to use is milk. So you can go to the grocery store and you can buy a gallon of milk, and say you check the expiration date and it's not going to go bad for like 3 weeks, and you're like, that's great. So you go home, you crack it open right away, you start using it. As soon as you crack open that milk, it's gonna start going bad quicker. So it might not even make it to that 3 weeks. You might only make it 2 weeks, and then it's starting to turn sour. And vice versa. Sometimes you go to the grocery store, you get a gallon of milk, it says it's going to go bad in 2 days, and it ends up lasting a week and a half. So it goes way past the expiration date. It's kind of the same thing with the inks. As soon as you start installing them, the degrading process is going to speed up a little bit. So we recommend writing the date that you installed the cart right on there. So you can kind of see in the picture that we've marked these with a black Sharpie marker. On the new printers, we've actually placed a sticker that's like a dry erase sticker so that you can write the dates more conveniently and just erase it when you're done. And so you just always want to be aware of the use by date that's written on there and the date that you've installed it, and just keep track of that. Because if you leave your inks in there too long, that can cause banding, you know, maybe some clogs and definitely some color changes. So just one thing to watch out for. The next thing I want to mention is to take advantage of your informational resources. So as a sublimation specialist, me and my fellow coworkers, we make a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of how-to videos. You know, we do stuff like these webinars. We've made templates for every single item we sell, and we just want it to be as easy as possible for you guys. So if you guys ever have a question, make sure you call in to us or check out our website. I just wanted to go to the YouTube channel real quick to show you guys that. It's just YouTube user JDS Industries. If you just go to YouTube and type in JDS Industries, will pop up. But as you can see, we have videos on, you know, our company in general. We have all our sublimation tutorials. There's not every item we ever had in there, but we cover a majority of them. If you guys ever do lasering at all, we've also have some lasering tutorials. Corel Draw tutorials. This is a great place to pick up some easy tips on design software. Here's where we'll archive our webinars, this little webinar section here. And we also have webinars from some other people, some guys that like Sawgrass and stuff like that. So that's really great stuff to listen to there, really informative. So definitely check that out. Also check out our website. So on our website, I mentioned this before, we have templates and we have all the sublimation instructions. And I'll show you guys where you guys can find that. So once you get to our website, you'll log in with your dealer login. Up here in the left-hand corner, there's a resources tab. When you click on that resources tab, it brings you to this page. And as you can see here, we have our product template download, and that's all powered by Dropbox, which some of you might be familiar with. But you can just search for the part, or you can search for all the items by part number. We also have a download center that has all our catalogs in PDF form. So say you lost your catalog, or maybe you're on the road or something, you can look through the catalog and find a bunch of our items there. We also have a link to the YouTube channel in here and a bunch of other great stuff. So take advantage of these resources. So at this point, I'll take some questions here. So feel free, write some questions in the little comment box there, and I'll pick out a few here that I can answer for you. So here's a good question. It says, what if you don't start using the ink cartridges? Does life start after you install? Which I kind of went over. In case I want to get backup set of inks, I wouldn't recommend stocking up on inks. We have warehouses. We have 14 warehouses all over the nation. So most of the time it's within a day shipping, and your printer will definitely notify you before you get too low on inks. So don't stack up on too much ink, because yeah, it does have that shelf life, and it could go bad. You don't want to install it within 2 months of the use by date. Not recommended. So don't stack up on too much inks. Just kind of use our warehouse as your storage. I had another question that said, do you still carry the 7100? Yeah, we still have very few. I think there's only probably maybe 10 left, but we do still have the 7100. Here's another one. Does the spray leave a residue? Yeah, the spray will leave a residue. So you take the spray and you spray it onto the transfer, not onto the substrate itself. So you'll spray it on that transfer, then you'll apply it to your substrate. And on the t-shirts, it won't really leave a residue. You can't tell on the t-shirts, but if you're doing a hard substrate, it will leave a sticky residue, and that's when you'll use the Roncinol lighter fluid to clean it off, or isopropyl alcohol, anything like that. Here's one that says, sometimes when you spray you get spots. Any suggestions on that? I think what you're referring to is sometimes when you use the repositionable spray, it can kind of spit these big globs out onto your transfer. and that can kind of really affect the end design. So what I recommend doing, or what I do, is I have a spray box. So I just have a big cardboard box on the ground, and before I spray my transfer, I just spray it into that box to make sure there's no big globs or anything that are going to come shooting out, because it, sometimes it dries on the surface and clogs that nozzle. So just give it a few sprays, make sure there's no globs that are going to come out, and that's what I do before then. This one says, do you have a mug press that will cover a 32-ounce hydro flask? No, we don't have a mug press that'll do that. That mug press that I showed before, that's really the only one we carry. So that can do a 15-ounce mug, I think is the biggest it can do. Somebody's asking about the cost of the heat presses. Like I said before, the cost of the heat presses are going to range depending on what size and what the different things you get, whether it's automatic, manual, non-digital, digital. So that might be a question. Shoot me an email and I can definitely answer that for you. And I'll go to this next slide here. You can see our information there. So the email address listed there. Make sure you guys shoot those questions over if I can't get to all your questions. You can also call into our tech support line there. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook. I'll answer one more question here. Yeah, so this is a good tip. It says you might want to mention the shipping. I love the fact that I usually get my orders within 2 days. Yeah, so like I said, we have 14 warehouses across the nation. So we try to have a warehouse centrally located in most areas so that any shipping is within a day or two. So that's really convenient, and that kind of goes back to, you don't want to stock up on too much inks, because you can definitely just get inks pretty, fairly quick. So that's really all the time I have for questions now. If you guys have any other questions, please do email us or call us. I want to thank you again for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Definitely contact us with any further questions. I want to thank you guys.